Hello, folks. Welcome to an edition of Market Action. Dave Russell here. So basically, we had early today this huge move in the futures because of a poll saying that Brexit was going to go with Remain. See this big rally at 4 a.m. and we're just, most of this move occurred. Look at SPY. This was interesting, I think, and this shows just what can happen. I mean, almost all the move was in the gap, and if you actually look, we've basically moved today, 80 cents on SPY on the intraday of, if you look at the low and the high. And I think it just kind of shows when we have these kind of events, futures are a great instrument. And also just to realize that if that pull had been the opposite way, it could have just, gone the other way. So gapping is just one of those things that, we have to be aware of. And it's also one of the reasons why I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that you can do with futures. Now, in my opinion, something like this was like, who knows what was going to happen. This is just a very difficult environment, and I think that we're not going to see, this sort of thing doesn't happen very often. This is like, the Fed happens all the time compared to this. Payrolls happen all the time. Something like this, who knows. So here's the thing. In my morning note, I basically went through and I tried to give a timeline of how things are going to work out. 5 p.m. the British polls close. This is New York time. And then basically official results will be known between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. And the person to watch for is someone named Jenny Watson. So you might want to Google her and know what she looks like if you're watching TV to know, that's when you can turn off the mute. When you see her come on TV, you probably know that's going to be the news. It'll be tonight. But I want to just let you know about that. We're just chopping around here. Obviously, financials leading to the upside today. But I think there's some other stuff happening, and that's in the semiconductor realm. We were bullish on Micron when it pulled back to 12. It got an upgrade today from, I think, Susquehanna. And, this is, the semiconductor space is just quietly coming to life. If you look in the last month or so on Research Lab, trying to see here if we can really see it. I know that we have seen, I'm looking into the individual names, and semiconductors have been outperforming. I'm not sure if they show up at the top of the list, but they've been starting to come to life recently. The SMH, for example, if you look at it, it's really been outperforming. If you look all of its performance virtually has been in the last month, right? So, it's up in the last 3 months, it's up 5%, but in the last month, it's also up roughly 5%. What does that mean? It means all the move has been in the last month, and that's one of the things that's interesting about this. I also think it's interesting because I started doing some kind of deeper digging into Research Lab, and I was looking around for like recurring themes in terms of events. And what I noticed was semiconductors, e-commerce, and fast food have had several bullish activity by analysts. I overall am not a huge follower of analysts per se. I think it's important, though, to know what they're talking about. And my view is that they're kind of like information on a scatter plot. If you see a lot of stuff pointing in one direction, it kind of is an incremental sense of things improving. We've been seeing that in the semiconductor space. We've been seeing upgrades, target price raises, and bullish initiations. And the fast foods group has also been quietly coming to life. So just want to point this out. We look at fast food. It's also been outperforming in the last month. We see, it's had some positive initiations here. I just think this is kind of interesting. So I wanted to just, outline that those things are kind of popping up. We look at the option activity today. We have a few things. Intel, speaking of semiconductors, in Intel they're buying the 33.5 calls of July. Now I really like this because to me, when we think about Brexit, we're talking financials. That's really where if Brexit happens, financials are going to get hit. Semiconductors are going to get hit a little, but this is a whole different area. This group's been doing pretty well here, and I think we're basically seeing now that semis are really coming to life. Look at this breakout here in Intel. There's two ways you can draw this. You can draw this as a kind of descending line, or you can draw it as a flat line. Either way, though, I think the risk reward in Intel, let's take a look at these calls in the Inside Options Pro activity log. What we can basically see is these Intel calls were not expensive. And they have the potential here, I think, something like 25 to 30 cent calls. This is the thing why we have options. Because if you have a stock like this and this sector continues to rally, Intel could easily take a stab at 35 and a half, 35, back toward these highs. And I mean, if you buy those, those 33, those calls will go up 7, 8 times if that happens. And the stock could easily go to 35 by July. Because say Brexit doesn't happen, like I said, this market could go straight up into July 4th. And something like Intel here, look at this breakout, the relative strength in semiconductors. This name could rip, and I really like that trade. Another one is Neurocrene, NBIX, the biotech stock. I think Mikey did an alert on it, or he's about to. Yeah, right here you got an alert by Mikey. The AUG 50 calls. Now, something very interesting happened yesterday in the biotech space when basically the rules, for pricing of the biotech, they basically said, we're not going to regulate your pricing this year. And biotech's been strong. And I think at the end of the day, I think it basically shows, I'm cynical at politics. I think Hillary Clinton knows that she needs that she doesn't want to alienate business community too much. So now the overall political establishment is not going to beat up on drug makers. That's what I think is going to happen. That's how I interpret it. I'm very cynical about politics, so I tend to think that whatever the Obama administration did, they're going to do it to help the Democrats. And I'm not going to, it goes both ways. Republicans do the same thing. All I'm saying is I tend to think right now that it's a positive shift of sentiment in favor of biotech. And I think when you look at biotech here, I mean, it's the bottom of this range. And this is one I've been wrong about before. I was interested in it too soon. But nonetheless, it's making a higher low. A lot of the negative scare thing that is coming out of it. And this is also something I think here that the risk reward in biotech is interesting. I'm not saying to buy IBB, but I like these calls Mikey did right here in Neurocrene, AUG 50 calls. This has been a great name. I don't know exactly what they do in terms of, what their drug is, but this is one that also had this big run. It's been consolidating more recently. We had some decent trades on this one last year. I remember I traded a little bit last year. And it seems like, this could be it's also, if you look at it, I mean, this has definitely done better than other biotechs. Let's actually do this. When we go to display and we go to compare, we can put in IBB on the Options House platform. What you're going to see is this has been outperforming biotech, in the last 6 months. Let's see, the last year. I mean, it's clearly outperformed the sector, and I think that also tells you something. So I love to see the calls, want to buy a good stock. We want to have the good names, and I think right now with the sector, it's been a weak sector, but there is the potential here for something of a turn, and I think that those kind of calls make a lot of sense. NBIX AUG 50 calls. Cypress, speaking of semiconductors as well, Cypress Semiconductor, this thing has just had paper after paper after paper. Today, it's the July 11 calls. But look at this thing. I mean, look, by the way, folks, you can always look up here as well and see that the names have been very active, at least 3 times in the last 30 days. But look at Cypress. This is the 3rd time this month we got the upside, this time the July 11 calls. So we did not do an alert because we already had the existing position in the July 12s. But, to me, Cypress is another one. Just semiconductors keep pushing here. Let's take a look at that shorter term chart. Again, interesting. Look what we have here, 50-day moving average crossing through the 200-day. There's call buying in Yelp as well. In Yelp, they're buying the July 29 calls. E-commerce. Some of these e-commerce names are kind of interesting. Grubhub is one that, let's take a look at this. This is one I always thought was interesting, that this stock is going, I don't know, there's just something good in this name. And I'll tell you, some of you guys have kind of, given me grief about this on the little chat. You said, I think you're crazy. Grubhub is terrible. But I've told you, I mean, there's just something in this company. And you look at this pullback to 28 here. We had paper in it recently. I just think, this is an area as well where there is, finally after these companies went public and they shake out and everything happens, this is the reason why in my opinion, IPOs are a bad idea. If you buy IPOs, you are handing your money to some investment banker in Silicon Valley. You got to wait for these things to season. And I stand by that when it comes to these other names like Square and everything else. A stock like this can just keep going down. Let them play out. I mean, look at what's happening in like Lending Club and these guys where basically they just keep raising money for something that it just seems to me a very obviously broken business model. And I think let these things season. The public markets are way smarter than what these guys have been doing, at least recently. And I think when you look at these big tech names, that's going to be true for something like Square and some of these other names. Let them season. But now that Grubhub is seasoned, it's interesting. Now that Yelp has gotten just destroyed and coming off the lows, now's the time it's more interesting. Just want to point that out. JCPenney. This is a company, talking about online, it's a little bit different, but obviously they're trying to build their online business. And in JCPenney now, we're seeing the 1st of July, 8.5 calls. They got rolled to the 9s of the end of July. So it's easier just to look right here on Research Lab, and we'll see what I'm talking about. Go to JCP on Research Lab, click on the button for options, and you're going to see right here, wow, look at this. This has grown in size since we did it earlier. But basically, JCPenney, they're rolling those calls from the beginning of July to the end of July, and they're moving up by 50 cents on the strike. Let's take a look here at JCP, what it was, the actual size. 10,000 rolled to 10,000, but now if we actually look, we're seeing something bigger. So this is interesting. Let's take a look over here. I'm now curious. I want to just take a look at this JCPenney because there could be something here that's more 30,000 now at that $9 line. Let me take a, folks, I got to look really fast. This is too interesting to just ignore. JCP. Wow. They've been coming back. All right, so they did the first trade at 10.11. They did the first trade at 10:11 New York time, and they came back with another 17,000 at 11:35 Eastern time. 11:35. See, as the stock was running. Now they bought the top. I mean, you got to be a little bit. This is probably someone who just they see this thing running away from them, or they're short. I mean, I'm looking at it as like 33% short interest. Look, folks, I was bullish on this stock, and I liked it when it pulled back here, and I'll tell you, I was way too early. I just got crushed. And it's, again, I broke my own rule. Wait for the 20-day moving average to turn higher. Get that pullback to the 20-day, like right there. That was the signal on JCP. I was way too – I tried to buy it here, and I got stopped out. I rushed it. I want to just point out, this rule of waiting for that 20-day to give you the signal, look at how well it worked right there on JCPenney. Right there. Boom. So anyway, this name has been bullish. It's had a lot of paper recently on the activity log. Look here. The today, the 16th, the 15th, all the way back. And one of these trades was already updated nicely. So JCPenney has been showing some real traction in terms of, look at their last earnings report. Where they cut their margin guidance, but if you actually dig into it, they had some very interesting stuff in terms of there was something about the online business that was actually showing real traction. So I don't want to dig into it now, but there was that last earnings report. I mean, it looks bad there, but there was actually some really good stuff in it, and I thought it was interesting that that this stock just continues to see the upside. Pfizer, they're rolling the puts from Jan 28 to Jan 32. This is just protection moving higher in strike in Pfizer. Micron has AUG 13 calls bought. It's already moved a lot, but AUG 13 calls bought in Micron. STX. Seagate, we're seeing the AUG 13 puts rolled from the 22 to the 20 line. I don't know what it is. I mean, we continue to see strength in this area. This is the kind of the tech value hunt. Look again over on Research Lab at the groups. We can see today that the disk drive makers continue to do pretty well. They're here somewhere, disk drive makers. So anyway, just want to point that out. Again, this is stuff like tech. They're buying hardware, semiconductors, and disk drive makers. And we've been mentioning this trend recently in the technology sector. 3D printers, we were talking about this. We were basically saying the 3D printers had bottomed, and we just continue to see strength. These guys are now, this is I should basically mention this stock looks bullish to me. And I just think this is another one here that we want to really watch. I mean, this is a bullish ascending. See how I made a slightly higher low here? Now that 20-day is rising. I mean, 3D systems here, this is another one that could break out and rip higher. A lot of short interest in 3D systems. Let's take a look at Stratasys. This one's not as clean of a chart, but this one's poised for a 50-day moving average breakout. And if you look at squeezing into this range, I don't like this chart as much. But like I think you can see if you look at the longer term, I drew this because I was calling this a rounded bottom. Something like Stratasys as well. In fact, I want to say right now, if Stratasys really breaks that high around 20, a little bit around 24, if this, I think our signal is going to be in this one, like 24.20. I'm going to signal that, I'm going to program that price alert in Stratasys if it breaks 24.20. Because that would basically signal a higher high and a break of the triangle. Take a look at some of your questions. Netflix, is it holding the bottom of the wedge? I got to tell you, I just don't like what's happening in Netflix here. It is kind of holding, yeah, it's holding the bottom. It probably has a little bit of a bounce here. Let's just start this chart over again. It's got way too many lines on it. Yeah, I think that has probably got a modest sort of bounce, but I think that the news flow in this has not been good. I've seen a lot of stuff about them losing market share and other things. I think you get a modest bounce in it. I'm not a big fan of it, but I think it probably is going to have a modest bounce a little bit over. If you go back to 100. All right, let's take a look. What do I think about BlackBerry? I was in the calls. BBRY. I don't know. I didn't really look at their earnings too closely. Let's take a look. My colleague helped me with it, so let's take a look. We had earnings revenue revenue miss. It seems like it's still a turnaround story. I think that it's interesting. We've seen this pattern in a lot of these tech stocks. Bearish descending triangle. Remember Oracle? And then it broke it to the upside. So I think this one, let's see it clear 7.5 before we say anything else. This one could just be this high from earlier in the month. On this one, we want to set our price alert at around 7.5. I just want to point out, I really, I don't like event risk, which is one of the reasons why, I've been very wary going into something like Brexit. But I want to point out that I am not by any stretch bearish on this market. I see the potential of this market to really move higher. The thing I actually wanted to point out, and I put this in this morning's note, but I think this is interesting. Look at, for example, Euro Yen. Okay, Euro Yen here is, look at a long-term chart of Euro Yen. This is down. It's coming off, and it's not all the way down to the range. But look at Euro. Look at Dollar Yen. Dollar Yen this is a long-term chart that goes back to 2014. This is a really important level, and Yen is holding that level. And I got to say, the Yen right now, for me, I saw an article recently that said that there is a net long position in Yen, which goes the up. So that means the stock. When people are net long Yen, it means this goes lower. Okay, so this is actually bottoming out. So this is basically showing by being net long Yen, what they're doing is they're selling dollar Yen at support, right? So 104 is the support. They've been piling into dollar Yen here at the lows. I'm sorry, they've been piling in on the short side of dollar Yen, on the long side of Yen at the high. So they've been piling into Yen at the high, okay? And if this starts to reverse lower, I mean, this whole turbulence this year resulted from the Yen gaining. But now they're buying the Yen at the top of its range. And if this now turns the other way, you could see the Yen get unwound. You could see dollar Yen and Euro Yen both rally. And if that happens, we're talking copper, we're talking steel, we're talking emerging markets. They're all going to fly to the upside. So I think right now we have a lot of ammunition that could really turn this market into something bullish. So I just wanted to point that out. take a look at some of the other, um, you know, another one of my favorites that it's been a sloppy name a little bit, but I do like it is Bristol Myers. The 22nd of July calls at the $75 line were bought in Bristol Myers. I still like this name, but I've just gotten shaken out of it. I'm not sure what to do with it. That's my concern. Is sometimes in a stock like this, it could just chop around for a while and then rally later. I like this name. I think it makes sense to be long, but it has volatility that I'm not really sure exactly what it's going to do. They're buying puts in PPL, this utility stock, the July 35 puts. There's also put selling in Pandora. This is one that we've been mentioning. It's another e-commerce stock that seems to be working higher. The $11 put's expiring on Friday. So these guys are fearless going into Brexit. They say, you know what? If Brexit happens, I don't care. Even if Britain leaves the EU, you know what? Pandora, $11. I'm a buyer. I don't think it's going under 11, and that's the low from earlier in the month. All these stocks are showing similar patterns. The Nasdaq, e-commerce, software. Well, software hasn't been as good. We've actually seen some bad numbers from Adobe and Accenture. Red Hat not so hot either. But I think e-commerce, semiconductors, 3D printers, that's been heating up. And also another one that we've been a fan of that has pulled back is Thermo Fisher. They're selling the 145 calls of August. All right, take a look at some of the other questions. KRA, why the big jump today? I don't know why KRA is up. I don't even know this stock, but we'll take a look at it. KRA, you want to check that? All right, let's take a look here. What is my opinion of HA? My opinion, I got to say, I'm just, in fact, talking about airlines, there was just right now we got about less than an hour before market action began, this company basically came out and they lowered their outlook for growth. And I think I think that the airline sector, we just continue to see that is just muddy and it's not super clear. We continue to see, look, we've had in the last month, airlines, 8 times in the last month, we've had companies in this sector make a new 52-week low. And of those, it's AAL, JBLU, JetBlue, and UAL. But, you can just kind of dig through this and see. It's interesting to see now Love. Look at the earnings history in this industry. They're all red. So I think that this kind of just shows something. UAL tried to kind of bounce at the lows. I just still think this is an area where a lot of people have been wanting to buy it. They might have some upside, but I still think that the story is just muddied. And, to me, this is something that it just continues to be a problem. And I want to point this out. This is one of the things we pointed out in Palo Alto and in Miami. You should think about stocks in many ways according to these big macro stories. And, in fact, we're going to go ahead and one of these webinars, I'm going to actually share my PDFs with you guys, the slides, because we go through stuff like margin expansion, good pricing, bad pricing, gaining market share, losing market share. These basic catalysts and stories, it's like a love story. Right? It's like, it's a movie. There's a love story, there's a mystery, there's a comedy. Stocks are the same way. It's a growth story or it's a value story. It's a margin story or it's, something else. But the key thing is it can be boiled down. Airlines right now, they have been a bad pricing story. And this information here from Love just confirms that this problem continues. Too much capacity. These guys expanded at the wrong time. Also today, we had the best jobless claims in basically in 2 months. New home sales, not so hot. April revised lower. Now, I looked at some of the guys I know at Moody's. They do this, they dig into all this stuff of the patterns. And they made an observation about a week ago. This guy, Ryan Sweet, who works at the credit side of Moody's, works with John Lonsky. He put out a note, and he said, if you look historically, the trend in building permits points lower for starts. Housing, I think, is something here that, I think we've had a decent bounce in it, but, it's something here that, it's not massively clear of a story. And I'm not saying I'm bearish on housing, but I think we've been seeing information that is giving us non-confirmation of the bullish case. The economic news has not really shown it, and I would be wary of housing here. It's kind of stalling, and I just want to point that out. We've seen a few things that just have not really totally convinced me that just because house prices go up doesn't mean that home builders are good. And I think there's just been some things here that are not terrific. May new home sales missed, April revised lower. All right, let's take a look at some of your other questions. Let me take a look here. ALRM has strangles. Yeah, I don't know about. We just don't mess with this. I don't know. This is a very obscure company I've never heard of. I'm not going to be able to discuss it. What do I think about RIG? Well, it's interesting because energy here. Look, I got to say that when we get through Brexit, if I'm right about the yen, energy is going to fly. And I think energy really has, I think the sector here, this has got a bullish sort of triangle. It looks to me like it's going to continue higher. I think this is one that if we have a day when it looks like energy is going to rally and this starts to break out, you'll get a fast continuation. I also think that it's interesting because this group appears to be showing signs, I think, the ocean drillers. See, they've been outperforming the S&P all year. Some of these companies have actually kind of been, look, we've had analyst upgrades in the space. We've had bullish paper. I think this stock is turning higher, but I also, it could easily have a dig down under 11 rig. I think the real level in this one is going to be, closer to 10. I'd say, I think it's bullish, but I also think that you might see it go down, around 11. I think it could take a shot down, rig down, but I think it's bullish, and I think that the tide has turned in this sector, and this is going to be one of the companies that will benefit from that. Huntsman, HUN. Materials, they're all going to follow what I said about the yen and commodities. Chemicals, they often follow the material sector. And, if you look at this here, this is poised for a breakout as well. Look, there's a line here right around 16. It looks like a bullish triangle to me. Again, it's one of these things where it's kind of poised for the breakout. It might drop down closer to 15 and then break out. And I think it's just going to be all about, what's the Brexit news tomorrow? If Brexit is positive, the stock is going to explode higher. If not, it's probably going to test down closer to 15. So I think this is one now that these things are just in triangles, and they've started to move. And I think that I think right now what we're seeing in this is we're basically seeing a lot of people are positioning for the macro weak dollar trade that we've been talking about for the last few weeks. They're positioning for UUP, to break lower and for commodities and materials to rally. And they're looking for it to happen, and the charts are all pointing in that direction, and I think it's going to happen. So I think HUN here is good, although it might get knocked around a little bit in the meantime. It looks very bullish to me. What about Costco and PG? I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Costco. I think it's just kind of drifting aimlessly here. And, I want to point something out because there was actually a story on Bloomberg recently that confirmed what I've been noticing in the grocery space, which is that Trader Joe and Aldi, it's in Chicago, but this is a bigger trend, I think. I think these guys are disrupting an industry. And, Costco's not exactly in that space, but I think right now there's some other stuff happening, and I'm not a big fan of Costco here. Um, Procter and Gamble. It's interesting because Procter and Gamble. No, that one's not. Sorry, let me take a look. PG. I have one that it's a consumer staple. Now this looks like this is more likely to break out at 84. And the other interesting thing about this name is, yeah, I think this one's ready for a breakout. Look at CL. This one came up to me when I was doing some scans. Colgate Palmolive. This stock I think is poised for a breakout to new highs. It's got a bullish ascending triangle as well. So I think CL. CL I think has been the stronger name than Procter and Gamble. Not sure if there's something specific happening in that, but these consumer staples, there's been a lot of breakouts. Look at Post, for example. This thing just started ripping the other day. This one also, same pattern, bullish ascending triangle. See? And now you see the same thing in Procter and Gamble. Well, it's not quite a bullish ascending triangle, but you do see the same thing in CL. But they're all poised for breakouts, and I think that that's going to happen. The other thing is, these companies have a lot of overseas business. If the yen weakens, the dollar weakens with it. And remember, when it comes to currencies, the spectrum is on the very, far risk end. It's like risk on one side, safety on the other. On the far end of the risk spectrum toward risk is the Aussie dollar, or like the South African dollar, the New Zealand dollar. Then the next one is the euro. And then the US dollar is kind of in the middle, because sometimes what you're going to see is the US dollar, to the right of the dollar in terms of safety is the yen and the Swiss franc. So the thing is, especially the yen, so you could have the dollar gain against the yen, but fall against everything else, and it would be a risk-off trade. And I think right now we're setting up for the potential sell-off in the dollar, sell-off in the yen. If that happens, companies like Colgate Palmolive, these consumer staple stocks with a lot of overseas business, these guys are setting up for a potential improvement. And we've been saying this for a while, that there is a potential here. If this dollar sells off, suddenly the entire earnings of the S&P get revised higher, because so many of these companies have overseas business. So I think that's just something to remember, that this could be a major catalyst for the consumer staple space. And I think Colgate here is a great one, and Procter & Gamble looks to me like it's going to break out as well. Fiserv. I think you can wait for a pullback to the trend line here. I think this one can pull back, I would look for kind of these highs around 103. Something back toward these lows. This stock doesn't move super fast. I think it'll pull back down toward kind of 101, 102, something like that. But I do think it looks bullish to me as well. It's had some good earnings, and again, this is one of these names kind of like RIG. It might chop a little lower, but I think it's pretty bullish, and I don't think it's going to get derailed by a lot. Whole Foods. Well, this is holding a support. It's got a lot of short interest here. This could probably squeeze higher here. I think it'll probably bounce from here. This was a pretty good level. What do I think about Joy Global? If we see the commodity trade do well, this stock's going to break out. It's right at a resistance level. If not, it could pull back under 20. Let's actually start this over. Look, it's got this gap from back in September. To me, this could pull back toward 18, and it could also break out from this area. This is going to follow the macro commodity trade that I've been talking about. Caterpillar, Honeywell, 3M. Caterpillar is going to do the same thing as Joy Global. Yeah, I mean Honeywell and 3M. I've been watching these. These are just names that these are just going to follow the S&P. I think it makes sense to have some longer dated, lower delta calls in Honeywell. I'm out of it myself, but we were bullish on it at various times. I know some of you guys are probably still in it. I think it makes sense to have lower delta calls further out in time. That way, if Brexit happens or whatever, I think I was in the September 120s, something like these. Because if the stock drops, they don't have a huge amount of delta, and you still have time. So, and if it does rally, then the delta is going to increase with the stock. I think that's a better way to do that, because if we wake up tomorrow with no Brexit, this stock could just start running, and I think it will. I think Honeywell here is getting ready to continue higher. It's been a great name. So I think this is one that is pretty bullish, but I think you want to play it with the options. Do I like Adobe after earnings? Not really. I mean, this group has been pretty strong. I think there's definitely money coming into software here. But I think if you look at this now, that was not a great earnings report. I tend to think this could drift somewhat aimlessly. What I would do here is I would look at this triangle that we basically have forming in Adobe, kind of between 94 and about 100. I think it's going to be stuck in here for a while. And I think there's better names. I think Intuit, we've been bullish on Intuit for a while, and now Goldman Sachs put it on conviction buy. I think this stock's a good one, and I think we've been bullish on this really since back here in March. We were liking the turnaround story, and I think this is just a great company, and it's like people have just forgotten it exists. We have seen a lot of good stuff in this, and we were bullish on CA, things like this has been an interesting name. A lot of these names have been doing really well. I think Oracle, today those Oracle calls, Mike Bordos updated them with they doubled. I think this is a sort of thing where, inexpensive calls like this, Oracle, Intel, these kind of names I think still look pretty good. Adobe right now to me is damaged, not a great quarter. I think don't mess with that right now. My honest opinion. It will probably hold 94, but I just don't know if you're going to get a whole lot of anything out of it. Juniper. There's been a value hunt in tech, and it looks like this is going to be, it's got this gap, and if it starts to break up through 24, I think it's going to probably continue higher. The last couple of earnings in this stock have been pretty lame. See, I'm not a big fan of buying stocks with bad earnings. They just tend to repeat the bad news. I think this is a name that here. In fact, I have some names here on my list I want to point out. I was scanning for stocks that that had good earnings that have been consolidating since Ubiquity Networks, Ubuntu or something different. This stock here seems to be poising right around a $40 level. I'm not even sure exactly why $40 is such an important level, but it's clearly been consolidating here. If we go back and we do the interactive zoom, we might actually find, if we do a daily chart, when it sold off back here in 2014, we might actually find that there was a gap there. There might be something right at this $40 level. There's something right around here. But anyway, I think this name is, looking for names poised for a breakout. This company's had some good earnings recently, UBNT, Ubiquity Networks. They do this kind of networking sort of stuff. This has been, last couple of earnings have been good. I still like Akamai a lot, and we've cited this one. Now it's breaking out as well. I think there's a company that people just left for dead. And we've been citing this one on the pullbacks, talking about the earnings that have been the last two earnings right here good. Earnings right here good. We've seen this pattern again and again. Company rallied and they beat it down. Then it comes back and then it rips through. Things like TMUS and all these others have done that. Rallied, pulled back, and then it rips through the bearish candle. And now Akamai is poised to do the same thing. Splunk, I think, is poised to do, no, it's not Splunk. One of the other names on my list today had a similar pattern. We'll find it. But now we have Splunk. This is a software stock. It's had good earnings. It's basically poised for a breakout of 60. Cooper, now this is more of a healthcare name. Doesn't move a lot. You'll but look at this. Had a good earnings report, got smeared lower, held support at 160. This one, COO, they do medical devices. Now all of these I'm finding just by going to Research Lab, basically going to the homepage on Research Lab. It shows right here from the beginning, earnings news. Go to earnings news, go down to the bottom, click on more, and then you just go down, click on bullish, and then just go down the list, and you're going to find these names. That's how we're doing it. Another one that's bullish, it's right here, CRM. Good earnings report. Now it's pulled back to the 30-day moving average. This stock is just awesome. I mean, these guys have been incredible, poised for a breakout. I mean, if this thing breaks out, it's going to probably go to 100. I mean, that's the way this stock trades. I have other names. I kept some of the other names from yesterday that I just wanted to point out. By the way, I should mention, now that this biotech thing is getting in order, there's going to be a point when Acadia is just an awesome buy. I'm not sure where that is yet, but I think this is one we want to keep our eye on. If this stock goes down to 30, I think you're going to see a huge buying opportunity in ACAD. Tableau Software. I haven't been a fan of this stock, but the sector is definitely barking up the right tree. I think it'll probably rally up and fill this gap. It looks to me, again, all these stocks are showing similar patterns. I don't like this company. I gotta be honest. I think that I think their business is really overrated. I mean, they basically make glorified charts, and people think that they should trade at like 1 billion times their earnings. But I think it'll fill the gap to a certain extent. I think it could easily take a run towards 70. What do I think about STZ going into the end of the month? Constellation Brands, this has been a really sloppy name. I don't really have a good idea on it. We had calls on it, and it didn't work. I like the stock, but it hasn't traded well, so I think this is a difficult one. Will Ariad come back from the dead? It's a biotech stock. Wow. Well, I don't know what the catalysts are, but this looks like a buy right here. Look at this holding this support level. I think ARAD right here at 7.5 is a nice one. So now the only proviso I'd always say is, if they have FDA data coming out on like 2 days, you can look at this implied volatility constellation. Usually if there's a big event, you're going to see a huge spike. I'm not sure what the actual news flow has been in this name, but like I said about biotech, I think that it's time to buy some of the names that have good setups because like Neurocrene has the paper. This is one that I think that right here, just based on the technicals, this is a good entry. And now you have a good entry in a sector that is maybe good. Like I said, biotech has been weak, but it's maybe getting good. And I think this is actually a great one. It's very interesting. LUK and McDonald's. This is a weird insurance stock. I don't know. This one seems to have turned here. It's going to have a golden cross soon. It looks to me like it's pretty bullish, but it could also it could just basically stick to 18 for a long time before it really breaks out. I've seen some of these, and that 200-day is coming down in general. You just don't get a fast move with a falling 200-day. In my opinion, they have to stabilize, and then you get the continuation later. I think actually CA was an example of that a while back. You see how the 200-day was falling, and it just gravitated to the level, and then it ran. And I think that you could see that in some of these others. McDonald's, I like McDonald's. I think McDonald's is probably a buy here. But it could easily just take a little shot lower. I think it's a buy, but I don't see a good signal on it yet. That's my only concern. It could take a shot down to like 118 or something and then bounce. But I think McDonald's here is still in a pretty good place over the longer term. You know what? It can go to the 200-day moving average. I think it could go down under 118. It's one of these stocks, it could go down, it could just touch that 200-day, and then go to 140 after. because that's often how these things trade. It'll just go down, it'll touch that level, and then it explodes higher. Everyone's waiting for it, and then they just turn on the buying. So I think McDonald's is good here, but I don't like the setup. There's call buying in SAGE, Sage. I do not know this company. It sounds like another biotech that could be interesting. They are buying the July $35.50 calls. There might be an event here in July. It could just be the time. Usually you're going to see slightly higher implied volatility in the near term because of just the way that the time calculation works. So this may or may not be something. I would just say there could be an event in this that we'd want to look out for. But this level down here around 28 seems to be a good level. It goes back several years. Given what we're seeing in biotech, this one could also turn higher. Let me add that to the summary sheet. All right. All right, folks. Got to jump and S&P has just been kind of drifting here. I just go back to the futures chart here. Look at just like a one-day chart with 5-minute candles. This is one here that this could do anything. And I would tend to think, we're going to start getting this stuff. The earliest we're going to get it is going to be 11 p.m. I would tend to think now we've gotten this nice move, but I would tend to think that it's not worth doing much of anything, but this has some potential, I think, to drift lower. So just want to kind of say that I think you got to be, just realizing that this is a very unusual circumstance that we're seeing in the world right now. And it doesn't last, and we can go back to normalcy when it does. Actually, one thing I want to mention is there's been a lot of talk about Ladbrokes. This is the British betting agency that basically, in the old days, people used to look at them and use them to predict who was going to win elections. They were pretty accurate. But I do think also that Ladbrokes right now, I think there's hedge funds that are just betting at Ladbrokes. And so I would just say that in Ladbrokes, they say 80% Brexit will fail. Well, that's basically how people are positioning in the equity markets. Most people I know are just assuming that it won't happen. And I don't really know. I would just say that the political polls are not that decisive. And, I just think it's interesting that people are talking about Ladbrokes, but at the same time, that could just be showing the same sort of bullishness that we've seen elsewhere in the market of big people simply positioning and finding different ways to do it. After all this stuff happens, we do have durable goods tomorrow, which is kind of interesting. So I hope everyone has a great and profitable end of the trading day. We'll be back tomorrow. Take care, folks.